Jo Chen, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me. This is a big deal. You're at Anime Expo this week. I know you don't do a lot of appearances on the West Coast. I know you've done some, but I don't think you've been to Anime Expo in quite a while. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it's like since 2003 or yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's a crazy convention. It's just grown and grown. It's a real madhouse as far as conventions go. I like to say it's like Lord of the Flies. It really feels like kids are running the whole thing.
it's about commission.
Signatures. Will you be signing everything, and are signatures free? Because I know some people do charge for them. Or what's the protocol there?
Yeah, most of the time I just do it for free. Unless
That's
people
great.
bring like a huge stack of comic books for me to sign, then I would
Well,
have to charge them.
yeah, and to anyone watching, I just want to say this should be obvious, but sometimes it's not. You know, with artists, especially artists who are signing stuff for free, whatever you do, don't make your own prints at home and then bring them to a convention and
Oh
ask
yeah.
artists to sign them for free. Unfortunately, that is a thing, and I think that's happened to you in the past. So that's not cool. That's not good form. First, I do want to talk a little bit about those Buffy covers because they really had an impact. And I know they were a while ago, but people still talk about them, and they really like them. And the thing that I want to ask you about those in particular is, with that assignment of doing digital paintings in which you're trying to capture likenesses of very recognizable people, it feels like there's a real danger of an artist's individual style getting lost in that type of assignment. And that's just the nature of digital painting. And it's almost the sort of thing that like AI would get that assignment today. And like my sort of preconceived idea of what might happen in that type of assignment is exactly not what happened at all, in that it's really remarkable to me how much your style seems to shine through that. So I just want to know, in terms of developing your style, is that something that you thought about? Because I know a lot of artists like, hey, especially when they're working analog, they'll like work on specific line quality that's recognizable so they can be identifiable. I mean, it's a bitch being an artist and like standing out because there's so many people there. So when that succeeds, it's valuable. It's worth something. But maybe that's not the case with you at all. Maybe you're, hey, I just do what I do and people recognize my style. Or was it a conscious decision to have a style that is identifiable?
Actually, no, it's not intentional though. So,
Wow.
it's sort of like well, I have to start from back then when I was a student. Actually, I went to art school when I was in Taiwan before I immigrated to the United States. And I always loved the look of the traditional medias like oil painting, watercolor. And and later on when I just started to draw for a living, due to the several factors or reason that I have to switch from traditional media to digital. I mean, time, right? It's faster.
Mhm.
I mean, more later, the publisher, they prefer the digital form. But anyway, and so I always want to try to recreate the look of the traditional media through
Mm.
digital painting. So to give my artwork an organic painting look. So every piece of work, I personally don't prefer the airbrushy look. It's not intentional. I just accidentally transferred the style of my brushstroke when I did the, traditional painting media. And it just kind of, that style developed back then when I was a student. And it just transferred into the digital art,
Was it
to the
a quick learning process to transfer your painting style to digital tools, or did you find it came rather quickly to you once you made the switch to digital?
well, It's actually not that difficult to me personally because at that time, I started to learn digital painting when I was in high school, when I was in art
Mm,
school.
right,
And for me, just something like very new, fresh, interesting.
right,
And then they were just such, it seems like just a challenge in trying to draw, using like a stylus, on the computer. Back then, like I started by doing like working on Photoshop 2.0. It's pretty old, so don't ask how old I am. But anyway, so I I I don't know. It just for me, it's more of a difficult to learn how to use the hardware or how
right.
to understand the system.
The
But the
button,
drawing itself switched to the digital form because the basic is there. What I mean is the use of color and anatomy and everything. It's there. I mean, it's not really that difficult to switch. It just need to familiar with the tool.
mhm.
Uh, yeah.
So you mentioned that you went to art school, but you'd been drawing well before that, as a child. And I know your sister is an artist as well. How much do you think having a sibling sort of advanced and impacted your artistic development as a child, before art school?
In a way, I think it's good. I mean, being the creator, painter, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a musician or artist. It's important to have somebody to create or share similar interests, to create together with you. And
Mhm.
in a way, I think it helps a lot when I have a sister, especially that she is very talented. And it's not common to have a very talented sibling,
Sure. Right.
that share the same interest, right? And and for me, in my situation, and my sister, she's kind of similar caliber to me, I would say level, but
Mhm.
better. So it's very inspiring. And so I would say that after when we became more serious about drawing and want to do this professionally, we basically have a shared art studio together,
Mhm.
and we work on our own independent project, creative project together in the same studio. But very often we would critique each other's work, and we will help out each other's, to get out of our creator's block,
Mhm.
because in a way we understand each other's very much, including our work. So at the same time, when you're focused on something for too long, you become blind to it.
Right.
And my sister then, or sometimes me, we will step in and to give them the problem, get each other critique or point out what the problem is, because usually the outsider is clear
Right.
about what the problem is, but with
W-
slightly different perspective.
Right. When did you both start? I mean, how young were you when you really took, a liking to drawing?
mm, I would say when we're like 13, 14,
Mhm.
and during that time, we're not satisfied just by doing comics and our sketchbook. So
Mhm.
we just gather a bunch of friends and from my school, and that who can draw very well, and we just form a club together. At the beginning, we would do something like a Kinko,
Right. Yeah.
self-published books,
Yeah.
right? Then later, it got discovered by the publisher in Taiwan, and they're interested in our work and ask if we're willing to kind of work on some. It's sort of like a doujinshi
Mhm.
project. It's not really like a commercial work.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
sorry.
Sure.
Yeah,
So
her
other
ex
than
artist.
Osama Tezuka, what manga artists were an influence on you when you were young?
Well, we still have to start from Osamu Tezuka. Well,
Yeah.
because it's like a chain reaction. So
Mhm.
I would say it started up by when we're like kindergarten. And the TV, back then there's only in Taiwan, because we were grew up born, raised, and educated in Taiwan. And so back then, the TV, there's not much, there's no social media, no internet,
Sure.
no advanced video game. So, and the TV only got 3 channels, and the cartoons are only available like every other day. So my sister and I, we read a lot of comic books and draw as entertainment. And at that time, I would say during that time, they run a lot of the cartoon that is actually done by Osamu Tezuka. For instance, like Triton of the Sea. I don't know if you know that.
Sure.
Because older audience will probably know it, familiar with it. Triton of the Sea, Princess Knight, Kimba the White Lion, and Astro Boy, although that's later on, in the 80s, not the earlier version Astro Boys. So, and as a kindergartners, we are very crazy about Triton of the Seas. We always think like, oh, Triton, he's so handsome, so heroic. So like he's a huge fan. And so we actually happened to find out there's actually a manga version of that title from the comic book stores. So we began to collect, the Triton of the Sea comic books. Then we realized, oh, Osamu Tezuka, he also did. Oh, it turns out to be the creator of Princess Knight too. Oh, he has a creator, the Kimba, the White Lions, and so on. Then we actually began to collect a lot of his comic books title, whatever has his name on it from the comic book store. We would just buy it. And that's how we later on get to know Blackjack and his Phoenix series.
Right.
So it's a long story. We became like his lifetime fan, both my sister and I. So she's the one who started to follow Osamu Tezuka. So I just follow my sister. But yeah, so I would say Osamu Tezuka is my biggest influence, the first and the biggest influence. And
the god of manga, as they call him.
The god of manga, yeah. And later on, then it's Yasuhiko Yoshikazu. I don't know if you're familiar with the artist.
Yep, sure.
He's a mangaka, yeah. And we began to pay attention to him, to Yasuhiko Sensei, when we happened to kind of see his one of his anime title. I don't know, it's not that popular, but at least not from the West. So I don't know if you're familiar with Giant Gorg, like a
Giant Gorg from 85. Yeah.
Yeah. And we found his title from the Japanese magazines called Anime Dea. And our art style and the character design just kind of remind us the Osamu Tezuka's Triton. The main character, his name was Togami Yu. And because when we're kids, the indicator or determine the handsomeness, right? The indicator of the handsomeness in the cartoon characters is the pointy hair at the back of their heads,
Okay.
And the main character from the Giant Gorg, basically directed or designed by Yasuko Yoshikazu. He looks like Triton, and you have that pointed hair in the back. And so it's then also that's later how we found out Yasuhiko's sensei's other title, like Arion and Venus War and the original Gundam. And of course, after we watched the anime, then we instantly fall in love with this. Well, me particularly with Yasuhiko Sensei's work, because I just love his storytelling.
So with the two characters, you've mentioned Triton and you mentioned the character in Giant Gorg. And you spent time talking about how handsome you thought the characters were. So this is an important starting point to talk about your connection with drawing handsome men, because that became a thing for you. So when you're thinking about the aesthetics of handsome men, it sort of developed with that. And like, were there other things that were influencing you? And like, how much are you meditating on trying to draw handsome men at this point? And how did, you know, that sort of begin the evolution to the work that you're doing now, which we'll talk about in a little bit?
Well, yes. I would say at the beginning, when I first learned to draw, I only did girl, princess, like any other girls, right?
Mhm.
Only until later my sister said, how come you always draw girls? Don't you know how to draw boys? And almost in a way, it's like a challenge. And I began to challenge myself. Okay, from now on, I only want to draw male characters as a practice. So, but, again, like any other little girls, we have our fantasy, or the prince or the heroic, handsome heroic characters. Then we're attracted to that.
Mhm.
So back then, my idea of handsomeness, based on uh, Osamu Tezuka's manga, or
Mhm.
Suhiko Yoshikazu's anime or manga, is that particularly it's more of a shonen style.
Sure.
All my artwork is in that style. At that time, we're just imitating his artwork.
Mhm.
And I was in girls' school,
Mhm.
and no girls like to read my comics. Then I began to learn or to get to know my next biggest influence, uh, Tadayumi. Tadayumi Sensei. She is actually, I've through her work. I mean, actually, I found that from the girl, like a manga magazine.
Mhm.
Although I wouldn't say her style is quite shoujo manga. It's
Mhm.
more unisex, in androgynous looking. I mean, and she writes mostly like short sketch, very short story,
Mhm.
and the subject matter is more of adult. It's not like girls fall in love.
Adult, not meaning sexual, but more mature.
Not really
Yeah.
adult, just mean more mature.
Yeah.
And they just like, there's no great adventures or a sci-fi or a big drama, or anything like that. But it's mostly, it's a her stories mostly just express some feeling and some mood. I thought it's kind of cool. And that's when I began to kind of change my style to, more towards her style is more like realism, because her characters are always very tall and lean,
Mhm.
androgynous looking. And all of a sudden, all the girls in my school, they begin to read my comic books.
Wow.
But in a way, I didn't do that just because, changing my style will make people read it. It's more of I personally also drawn to it because it feels different. It feels different from the other Japanese manga, and it's not American comics.
Yeah.
So in a way, that my later style, after I went to art school, when I became serious about drawing, and when I went to art school,
Did you go to art school after high school?
actually, it's more
Or
like a
just start-
trade school.
I see.
There's one of the most famous and most difficult to enter school. We end up basically going there. Because if you really want to become a serious artist, you go to that school.